Movies set in schools, school movies, not movies about school, but movies that are in kind of with schools. And we're going to go through our top four, our Rushmore of those. Now, this confusing, but we're going to make it all make sense. Right? Right, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm excited to go back to school through the cinema here today. And if you haven't already, guys, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're really excited. We got some fun topics fired up for the fall. And today we're going to kick it off with some school movies. So subscribe and let's go to school.
Let's go to school. D, start us off. Go to school, because I know I've got options here. So you start, and I could jump.
Oh man, I got to go with one of the classics. I would say early '90s. Really kind of pushed the innovation of hip hop and everything. And I got to go with House Party.
Ooh, nice.
I wouldn't have even thought that as a school movie, even though it is a school movie. That is a great pick. Okay, I like it. Kid and Play, man. I've hung out with Chris. I've hung out with.
I have too. Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah,
great guys. I mean, talk about iconic dance that changed the game. That LeBron was doing in commercials. People were doing it. Yeah, I love that. It's a great pick.
And what was funny is that I know that you guys have seen this meme around. Actually, I think you and I have shared it a couple of times. Is the meme with Full Force, where it's like they're like 40 years old, but they're playing high school students, and it's
so funny, bro. That was back then. But again, remember, we've been sharing a lot of these, like back in the 80s and especially 90s, everybody looked 100 years older than they were.
Yeah.
So like
totally.
It's like you're watching the movie Cocoon and they're like 40 when they made the movie. But like, it's like everybody was so much older looking. And I think in House Party too, you look back now and you're like, wait, these kids are in high school? Like, no. That's not.
And how iconic was the eraser head haircut?
It's the best.
It's so iconic, man.
And the
great
music
soundtrack, the music.
Yeah.
How about it? Martin Lawrence.
Right?
Martin Lawrence is.
Is that Martin Lawrence's
coming out
first
movie?
time?
Yeah, man. Hysterical. One of my favorites in every single thing.
That main track it's like the chorus, like
ain't gonna hurt nobody.
Ain't gonna hurt nobody. I love that.
So good.
Such a great party song.
All right, I'm going to go. I'm going in right now. I'm going to start off with one of the greats. And if I can put him on every list of everything we've ever done, he's been in everything and not just movies, but has covered all spectrums of art. I think made one of the greatest school movies of all time. And that's Dead Poets Society and my man, Robin Williams.
Wow, excellent.
Classy
choice.
The day. Classy choice. Young Ethan Hawke. I was never, it didn't happen until later. Like when I watched that movie when I was in school, it absolutely blew me away. And then when I revisited it later, it just showed the greatness of Robin Williams and what he was capable of as an artist to make you laugh, make you cry, make you always feel something. And just an incredible message, right, about life and what life means. And he's done that so well. So while it's a classy one, just an incredible film set in those school walls of the changing of what we can become, what we are, and how life changes all the time. So Dead Poets Society for me to start.
I love that pick, bro. I love that pick, man.
Yeah, and I think that was not the first movie, but one of the early movies where Robin Williams was like, yeah, I know you guys think I'm funny, but watch this. I can do the serious stuff too,
Oh man. But to me, like, I mean, he's on my Rushmore of everything because, and Mona and I talk about this a lot of people and I talk about this a lot, actors that can do both, right? And I'm talking at a high level. While Daniel Day-Lewis is one of the greatest actors, there's not a lot of comedy going on, right? Well, this is where the Philip Seymour Hoffmans, the Robin Williams, the people who at extremely high levels, Tom Hanks, who really shine in both genres, which I just think is almost next to impossible. And obviously he's done it and yet can insert some humor in like Dead Poets, Fisher King, Good Will Hunting, while making you really feel something. So his performance is outrageous.
That's a great choice. All right, so for my first pick, I'm going to go with, in my opinion, one of the funniest school movies of all time. You get to run the whole gamut of all the grades. And it also is a movie that put a legend on the map, and that is Adam Sandler's Billy Madison.
So good.
You know, getting a chance to see you know, in my opinion, a comedic genius like Adam Sandler, like being young and kind of really just getting a chance to star in his own movies for the first time. It was just raw, unbridled, unique comedy that we really hadn't seen yet. And it's fun because, like I said, you literally get to see him go, you know, from first grade all the way through high school in a short period of time, and he kind of checks all the school boxes in that movie, and I just love it. I gotta
And
dust
so
that one off.
quotable, like one of the most quotable
quotable.
films, right? Today, Junior. I mean, you're talking about one of the most quotable. I award you 0 points, like the ending. I mean, there is constant quotes from that movie. And again, we talk about how that doesn't happen anymore. And that's the kickoff for him, right? Like that's the beginning of
Yeah, I think that's his first star vehicle.
What a run, man. What a run.
remote control and you know.
Yeah, and then like you guys said, like that lit the fuse for Happy Gilmore,
Waterboy,
or you know, Waterboy, and obviously Big Daddy and Grandma's.
Talk about,
you know,
talk about a guy that switched it up though, man. Uncut Gems, man, totally different. Like switched the game.
He's
up
on that list who does them both.
Yeah,
right? And that was later. Punch
I
Drunk
remember.
Love is
I remember
one of my
when
favorite films.
you took the words out of my mouth. I remember when Punch Drunk Love came out. Me and my buddies watched it, and we were so confused. And we were probably too young to really understand how great of a film it was. We were like, "Wait, but when is he going to be funny?" We were like all so confused.
I just watched it again. His scenes with Philip Seymour Hoffman and that, you know, when they finally have that confrontation, is absolutely brilliant. And you know, you're right. I mean, that was confusing when it first came because that was, you know, PTA's like third, I think, after Magnolia, after Boogie Nights. So you're expecting, wait, is he doing comedy? But yeah, Sandler, the Sandman, as they call him doing, he's definitely on that list of people who do them both at a very high level. So few.
And produce as well too, man. He does it all, dude. He's a creator, ultimate creator. And
everything's in his own hands. He doesn't leave it to, you know, just really an innovator, creator, like, and just, yeah, he's amazing.
And he put on his boys. He brought all his boys along, man, which is great. You know,
takes care of everyone.
I mean, who doesn't love that about Sandler movies? And it took a few movies to figure it out, but after a couple, 2-3 movies, you're like, wait a minute, I know these guys. It's the crew. You know, I love that,
bro.
And just to say about Billy Madison, I mean, you know, again, when that came out, it was also one of those things that you're like, wait, what is this? What's going on here? Because that was the first of that kind of Adam Sandler. Yeah, that's
whole different style of comedy.
Awesome. All right, D, what do you got? Second.
All right. Looks like we're gonna have to dip into the Richard Linklater.
I knew it was coming from someone.
One of the greatest school movies of all time, man. I mean, young, you know, McConaughey, obviously, and
Ben Affleck.
I mean, Ben Affleck. I mean, Cole Hauser. The soundtrack's amazing. Really kind of, I mean, for me, it really kind of took me into my parents' generation when I first saw the movie, because that movie alone was kind of like, I think it dropped in like 93, but it was kind of like we said before. It's like, I don't think I saw it until it was like 96, 97. Like it wasn't released in theaters, I don't think. And it was kind of like one of those things you heard it like word of mouth, like, oh man, you're like, your homie's house, like, hey, throw this in, you watch it. And you're like, oh, this is a great movie, man. So I got to go with Dazed and Confused.
Yeah, my hometown, my current hometown, Austin, right? All here, Linklater. And I think same thing. I think it was more of like a VHS movie for me, where I definitely didn't see it in the theater, and I just kind of watched it, and I was like, wait, you know, because people started talking about it. What year did you say you think it was?
I think it came out in 93, but I don't remember watching it till like 96, 97.
Yeah, so I know where I was.
Maybe check that out, Tommy.
I'm on it.
Yeah. While you're doing that, I'm going to go right. That's such a great pick because it's such a monument. What year?
Demetrius is right on the money. It's 93. But yeah, I got to agree, man. I don't remember even seeing that until I remember that being a big movie for me in 6th grade, which was 96. So that one took a little while to get out there. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but I feel like in the mid to late 90s, there was this like kind of a reverse retro 70s stuff was big, you know, like that Woodstock era, late 60s, early 70s. It was popular. You had a bunch of kids like in my high school dressing like hippies from the 60s. So I think this movie kind of cashed in on that. Like, seems like every 20, 25 years, things become retro again. And I think this movie kind of fell right into that wheelhouse. But yeah, what a soundtrack, man. I literally used to like play this soundtrack and like airplay my guitar as like a 12, 13-year-old and like play all the songs with it because it's just stacked.
Yeah, and we talked about it with the Doors when the Doors came out. That was right when the 70s were kind of making a big comeback in the 90s. And I think that happens, it's like we're going through right now with the 80s and 90s, where it's become a big thing. I'm curious if forever somebody's going to be like, the early 2000s, let's do that. But I don't think so, because I think it's everything pre-internet. Like that's what people want to recreate. I think the last thing we'll do is like 98.
Yeah, well, it's also too is like back then it was like again, music, movies, fashion, everybody it was all differentiated, like Duran Duran, like I said before, Duran Duran was totally different than Prince, who was totally different than I don't know, Blondie, who was like it was just totally different than Public Enemy.
Way more variety.
Yeah, everybody had their own
innovation
lane,
and creation. Yeah. Just
now it just sounds like everything's just jumbled up,
Yeah,
for sure.
That's very true. All right. Well, speaking of non-jumbled up, this is my second.
Yeah.
Easy for me. 1986. Super iconic to me. One of the ultimate school films for a multitude of reasons. For me. And that's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And the reason being is, besides Mia Sara, the actress in it that I was, at that age, I was like, what is happening to me? But it was like that movie I hadn't really seen people talk to the camera directly, right? Like, and he was like
break the fourth wall.
Yeah, break the fourth wall and like talking to you. And yet he was so cool, right? And it was like there was all these different parts about like not just like it spoke to me in a way of like skipping school and like stealing the car and like really going on this adventure of like life and yet finding yourself, the true essence of a coming of age thing of like going through something in a comedic sense and yet finding something different about yourself with him and his sister and pre-Dirty Dancing, right? Jennifer Grey, and just super iconic. The lines, right? Still to this day, Bueller, and just everything about it, what it did for Chicago, what it did for Matthew Broderick and all that. I just think it's an absolutely iconic. There are certain things in pop culture history. If you see that image of Ferris, like everybody knows what that is. And I love that.
Yeah. I had a chance to meet Broderick. He was a really nice guy. Matthew Broderick.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Really nice
guy's
guy.
a legend.
I was marking out. I was like,
I would have been.
I was like, wow.
Yeah, I've never met him.
Man,
that's cool.
Yeah, really cool dude.
Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, that movie put Ben Stein on the map, that's for sure.
The
teacher. And just again, I think there are certain movies that kind of just sort of put a stamp on a decade. And I think if you watch that movie, like that is the 1980s.
John Hughes.
Yeah, it's so 80s. In Chicago, that parade scene is just fantastic. Everybody remembers that cool leopard kind of sweater vest that Ferris has on. I mean, he's just the fucking man in that movie, going to the baseball game, stealing the Ferrari, like you said. Just so many iconic moments. Do you have a kiss for daddy? I just love everything about that movie. And that was one that was in heavy rotation with me and my sister growing up. So yeah, great choice on that one.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines when he goes to the valet and he goes, "Do you speak English?" He goes, "Yeah, it's American." When he says that, it's just an incredible, constantly quotable and an amazing movie. Can't
They
wait.
seem so trustworthy, those parking lot attendants.
Oh man, until the car's flying off the thing. All right, Tommy, what do you got?
All right, number 2. I'm going to go with a very quirky movie from the early 2000s. I'm going to go with Napoleon Dynamite.
Great pick.
Nice.
I really that's a great pick.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I love that main character. And this was one of the first movies. I was in film school. Like I just started in film school when this movie came out. And this was kind of an indie darling in the sense that, it wasn't made for a ton of money. It had a very uniqueness to it. It had a unique quality. It was a Sundance darling. It did really well at Sundance. And the movie just fucking exploded and became a little bit of a pop culture phenomenon at the time. Like it's, of course, died down now. But I mean, there was a time when you'd go into like an FYE and there'd be Napoleon Dynamite merch everywhere. And
still
kids were
Vote
really
Pedro
into it.
shirts are everywhere. Still.
Pedro,
that's true. Yeah, I guess Vote Pedro has kind of lasted. So just a really unique movie. And again, as a film
Uncle
student,
Rico.
it taught Uncle Rico could throw a football over those mountains. And you know, for me, it was just one of those things where it was like, it taught me as a film student, like, wow, you don't need spaceships, you don't need car chases. If you have really cool characters and a nice, simple story that's different, you can make an amazing movie, and you don't need $100 million. So it was very inspiring for me to watch that one.
Yeah,
I
they
love
made
it.
it
I
for
love
like
it.
next to nothing. And, you know, it's one of those things that happens, you know, and I don't mean to compare it to this, but it's like the Macarena thing where it's like, you know, I call it the Macarena effect, where like it just comes on, it's everywhere. It doesn't go, it's like it's now embedded into culture. And it becomes like this thing where it kind of takes over the world for a moment. And that, you know, that's pre kind of internet, right? Is that pre
I would say
internet?
it was pre social media. You know, internet was a
Pre-social
thing, but
media.
pre social
Yeah.
media.
And it
Yeah.
just took over.
That's
and
MySpace. That's MySpace world right
Right.
there. That's what that is.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it'd be like, did you see it? Did you see it? Oh, I saw it again. I saw it. And then you just, everybody's talking about it and you know it's different, and it kind of took over. And then it kind of shape shifts the way the business is ran, because that's a truly independent film in every aspect. And yeah, absolutely tremendous. Uncle Rico was at the Emily, the Criminal premiere, and I was super excited about it.
That's awesome.
He's the best.
Nice,
All right,
nice.
go D. What do you got? Third
Man,
film.
I got to take it back to Chi-Town, man. One of my favorite movies of all time. I love the soundtrack, Tangerine Dream. I actually think it's probably one of Tom Cruise's best performances, and that's Risky Business, man.
Pooh, pooh. That
Nice
movie
I love the
is a
quote.
game changer.
Yeah, I love the quote by Curtis Armstrong. He's like, sometimes you got to say, what the fuck? And he's like, what the fuck creates freedom? Freedom creates opportunity. Say less.
School movie, huh?
Yeah, school movie. Yeah,
'Cause
he's in high school. He's getting ready to go to Princeton.
He's getting ready to go to Princeton. Is it like summer break? I'm trying to remember, because what I remember is the Porsche, and what I remember is Rebecca De Mornay. So he's like off school.
I'll tell you what I remember.
I think he just graduated. He's getting ready to go to Princeton, and so
I remember Tom Cruise sliding across the floor in his undies
Bob Seger
with that broom.
Yeah,
man. I mean, you talk about
movie star shit.
Movie moments. It's movie star shit. And what's cool about that, and I've mentioned this on a previous episode, when a moment in a film is parodied by dozens and hundreds of other movies and cartoons, how many times have we seen someone slide across the room in their undies? I mean, like, that's still a parody moment. So pretty iconic stuff.
And kind of a risky movie, like at the time, you
Great
know,
title.
I mean, Risky Business, and, you know, risky film. I remember being super young. I don't know what year it came out, and seeing that and being like, whoa, there's a lot going on in this movie, right?
How about Joey
Rebecca
Pants
De Mornay
getting it done?
Joey Pants
getting it done in that movie.
Oh, he was great, man. Yeah, no,
he had a run there with
movie,
the Goonies and that. Yeah, he killed it. In that moment.
And you got
What
the
year
whole
is that?
backdrop of Chicago.
I'm going to say 83.
83.
Yeah, 83.
Yeah. Great soundtrack. Great
What's
title.
fascinating is I'm 8 years old watching that movie. I probably shouldn't have been watching that movie.
Super appropriate for you.
Love on a Train, man, when they start.
Yeah, super inappropriate for me to be watching that at 8. But I definitely watched it at 8.
The door kicks in, the wind's flying everywhere, the dress goes up. It's like,
crazy.
Yeah. I love that movie. One of my favorite movies, actually. I watch it pretty regularly.
Well, I'm going to throw this movie on the list because I have to, and I would be remiss not to, because I think it has the most staying power of any film we're going to say. I think it's a cultural moment. I think that it is still talked about constantly. It's definitely, I can't imagine how many times it's been watched all over the world, but I think Grease is one of the best school movies ever made. I think that
choice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, I was a big Kinnicky mark. I love Kinnicky. I loved the T-Birds. I like, even though I had nothing to do with that era, right? It's the 50s, I think, right? Is when it's set.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big musical person by any means. It was all of it. It was the cars. It was the you know, the thing that was tearing up the metal on the bad guy's car, and it was Travolta doing the switch while she's doing the switch, you know, Olivia Newton-John. And then obviously I just remember the soundtrack playing all the time in our house. We had the record, and it just, again, like we were saying about Napoleon Dynamite, I think it kind of took over, and it spanned all ages. It was like young people and old people. The older people were seeing it and listening to the soundtracks. The younger people were, wanting to dress like that and do the dance and, the whole thing. And it really put Travolta on the map for me. Like from then on in, he was a monster mega star in my life. And I'm a big, giant John Travolta mark.
Same.
Obviously for everything that he's ever
I mean, how
done.
could you not be? He's one of the greats.
Oh man,
that's when
crazy.
I turn around and I take my shirt off and I have a Travolta back piece.
How?
I'm like, yeah, I know.
Why do people just like? It's so funny that he doesn't get like mentioned, and maybe it's because he had that super big low of like the 3 Men and a Baby low, that like 10, 20 year low, but like the dude just cries. He's got
like you gotta just take a look at the whole body of work though, man. His entire catalog is.
Here's what I always say about a great artist, and Grease is the start off for him. This is what I say about a great artist. Does he have 5 undeniable? Does he or she have 5 undeniable films? 5 undeniable. That's for directors, writers, actors. 5 undeniables. And when I say undeniables, I mean ones that you can say to any, to the Fairweathers,
no
to
arguments,
anyone, and there's no argument. Like Goodfellas, no argument, right? Godfather, no argument, right? And if you do that for someone, so for me with Travolta, it's like you're not going to argue Pulp Fiction, Grease, Saturday Night Fever, Blowout. If you know things about films, right? There's
Urban Cowboy, man.
Urban Cowboy. And people might argue that, but that you should revisit that because it's one of the greatest films. So again, I think Grease is the jump off for him, and I think it's an amazing school film.
And too, a lot of times longevity gets overlooked, but I think longevity says a lot too, man. I mean, if you can do it from decade to decade to decade, that's staying power, man. There's very few that ever attain that. So I'm with you, man.
Yeah, Grease is gonna live forever. And the other thing too is, I mean, it's also a movie with just 2 megastars at the time. You get Travolta and Olivia Newton-John together. I mean, that's some massive star.
He was a knockout, bro.
And,
knockout, man.
I feel like I think that movie had a little bit of a revival too, in the terms of like in the early 90s, like we talked about. The late 90s was kind of the 60s, like the early 90s. I remember the 50s were kind of big, so it's like that movie just
the
keeps
Stray Cats and that kind of music and
leather jackets. I remember kids were cuffing their jeans like greasers, what I mean?
I still do.
Everything kind of comes back, and that movie's just on another level, and it's kind of cool because it's one of those movies that you could also put on a Rushmore of greatest musicals of all time. So it's
that could make a few Rushmores, and Travolta Rushmore.
Yeah. We got to do something. We got to do a double at some point. We should add a little gimmick in here where we do like a double Rushmore. Someone that's
who's been on 2.
Yeah. So
that would be a good one.
Speaking of, it's late in the game, Tommy. Before you go, let's just talk about school movies and let's talk about hitting that subscribe button while we're about to get to the next one here, because
guys,
as you subscribe, it helps the channel.
Yeah, go over to our channel, hit that subscribe button. Let's get this algorithm pumping, will you?
They're on the channel. All they got to do is hit it. It's right underneath.
Yeah, it should be like right down there somewhere.
Yeah, just hit subscribe.
Click it right now. We're not going anywhere, we swear.
Get to your third. Back to
so my third one's tough, man. As you go down the list, it gets tougher and tougher as the picks go down. But I'm gonna have to go again. This is the fucking Rushmore here. We're not talking about just movies that you like a little bit. This is Rushmore. So I got to go with Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Could be Fast Times at Rushmore High for today's show. Again, when you talk about movies that kind of just sing to a decade, and like if I had a kid today, which I don't, but if I do someday, and I want to say, youngin, you want to see what the 80s were like? You put that movie on, and it's like, that's the 80s right there. I love that movie. And, everybody remembers one of the most famous scenes of a human being getting out of a pool ever.
Shout out
in a
Phoebe
movie.
Cates,
So it's like,
shout out Phoebe Cates, man.
And that's another, again, how many times has that scene been parodied? Somebody getting out of a pool all sexy. Where do you think that came from?
And really, Sean Penn, like, really, you talk about range, right? I mean, look at that range. Jesus.
Spicoli. I was actually Spicoli for Halloween one year, and I put a bagel in my pants and everything.
Stoner.
Reinhold. Don't forget about Reinhold.
Yes.
In there too.
Hamilton.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, just
No, I
an
love that call,
incredible.
man.
The principal, I always forget his name. The guy who is the principal, the older guy, the teacher or principal, who is all over Spicoli all the time.
Yes.
You know, the
Classic
yeah,
80s hard ass actor.
classic 80s hard ass. Because we were watching Back to the Future last night. It was the same thing. The guy who's calling him a slacker. He's like, "You're a slacker, like your dad."
Strickland,
like
Principal Strickland.
Yeah,
Top
it's
Gun.
like when you have those hard asses, you just play that role. Nobody can play them better. All right, D, what do you got?
Man, I'm
This is your
going back to
fourth.
the well, man. This is
Your
my
fourth.
fourth. This is the Chicago theme, man. Shout out John Hughes, Breakfast Club.
Nice.
I knew that was coming.
Big pop for that one.
Big pop for that one.
I mean, if that movie's not on
almost ashamed I
everybody's,
didn't.
That's going to be the
not on
most
everybody's
on people's
Rushmore.
list. Yeah.
Come on, man. The Rat Pack or the Brat
Brat
Pack,
Pack,
man.
the
I
Brat
mean,
Pack,
come on,
man.
man. Like, yeah. I mean, what a great movie. Very simplistic too.
Deep stuff, but deep stuff in there about his father.
But I'm saying how
and,
it's shot production wise. The
Oh,
whole
easy.
movie's in the school, in the library. Like, I mean, a couple
Very
scenes pulling up
producible.
to the school. Yeah,
Very
man.
producible.
So, and it works.
Clarence
man, so.
Beeks from Trading Places. I
Mhm,
mean, who I did my first movie with. Paul. My God, it's gonna kill me. Paul something. I was so excited. I did this little independent film he was in. Him and Dan Hedaya. And then obviously Anthony Michael Hall is like, I mean, he was on a run of all runs.
He made
Yeah.
being a geek like kind of cool.
He
made
changed
Weird
the
Science,
game.
right? Weird Science.
Weird
Yeah.
Science,
Club.
Vacation.
Geeks across the world
16
should just
Candles.
praise
Yeah.
him.
He
They
was.
should-
I mean, he was on a run of runs. There's not a lot of kids who had that run at his age. You know, maybe the Coreys and other people, but he had a run.
And
How
let's not
great was
forget
the character?
Emilio Estevez.
Emilio Estevez was unbelievable, and what's his
Judd
name?
Nelson.
Judd Nelson.
Jonathan
New
Bender.
Jack City. Shout out.
Jonathan Bender is such a well-written name. The name Jonathan
it's
Bender.
great.
It's just
Right.
like fucking perfect.
And Molly Ringwald really was the poster for that. I mean, she changed, again, there's that whole Brat Pack, that whole moment, that whole time of like, again, John Hughes really kind of took over the 80s. He really is the soundtrack of the 80s of what's going on. We've said 2 of his films, right now, or 3, in this. I mean, he's just took over and really set the tone. So great pick.
Yeah.
Great pick.
Jonathan Bender was like fucking 4 layers, man, of clothing. He's got like 4 different jackets on. It's like,
I love it.
Bro, how iconic is that fist pump at the end of the movie?
Oh yeah.
Are you kidding me?
So good.
It gives me chills.
What you got, Rossi?
All right, but this is my 4th and final, and I got to bring it in because, again, I think this was a time where you watch films multiple times. I don't know the exact year. I'm gonna say 90s, and definitely watched it all the time. Definitely into the 2000s. We had it on DVD. Was 10 Things I Hate About You. Big Heath Ledger fan. Huge Heath Ledger fan. Dave and I, Krumholtz, did a film together. Again, it was like one of those films that it just felt like a throwback for me of the way it just felt different. And again, I was being turned on to Heath, and I hadn't seen something like him in a while, when he came on and he just stole that film. And there's certain artists who come in front of you and right? You go, oh man, that guy's going to be like that person's about to pop. And not that they're the lead of the film, not that they're whatever. And it's this film set in school that he just stole every single scene he was in. So just for Heat, but just for the movie, I thought Dave was brilliant in it. What's his name? The kid from Looper. Who's the younger?
Joseph
Gordon-Levitt, right? Yeah, just game changer for us. And again, it's one of those films that we watched all the time, constantly. So I don't know if we had it on DVD, but I loved it.
That one falls under the category of phenomenal titles. Talk about a title that just gets your interest. 10 Things I Hate About You. And that was in an era when, we were used to seeing shorter titles with just like a word or two. And then you could see Trends Are an Amazing Things. Other movies started to have these kind of longer, thought-provoking titles where it's almost like a sentence. So love that title.
Yeah, and also kind of the end of that style of filming, like right about the end tail of like, you know, like Superbad really might be the end.
Yeah.
But that was even going more into like the raunchiness of it. It was just kind of the end of like something like life movies in a way where like we're going to do comedy but show you a reflection of your life. What do you got, Tommy? Final one.
I'm so excited for this one. I fucking love this movie, and I just want to sing it praises, and that's Encino Man.
Oh,
Great
there you go.
Encino
Great
Man
pick.
is if you kids don't know this one, Encino Man tells the story of a couple lovable losers who accidentally dig up a caveman that happens to be thawing out in their backyard.
Great pick.
And suddenly this caveman goes to high school and he's becomes the coolest kid in school. So I just love the concept that this Cro-Magnon man just takes over that school and suddenly is like the girls want to be with him, the guys want to be him, and he's just this total badass. And look, man, hey, Brendan Fraser just won himself an Academy Award, but for me, he's been doing it for me for years, man. I've always loved Brendan Fraser, and I just want to say a quick side note. I had 2 other Brendan Fraser movies as honorable mentions: School Ties and With Honors. Remember those 2 movies?
I've never seen With Honors, but I love School Ties.
With Honors is amazing. That's with Joe Pesci, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Brendan Fraser, as I made this list and as I started thinking, I was like, oh man, Brendan Fraser was knee deep in them school movies back in the 90s. So yeah, if you haven't seen Encino Man, check it out. Pauly Shore, just like we talked about movies that sing to the 80s, I'd say that's a movie that sings to the early 90s quite nicely.
Yeah, I said my honorable mention Superbad when I was just talking about other ones. That was one that I would have put. That's not on my Rushmore. It's an incredible. Anybody got an honorable mention they want to throw up?
I'll throw out Animal House, man.
Nice.
Good one.
You know.
That was on my original list when I was calling it down. So yeah, that's a good
how
call.
can you go wrong with Animal House, man? Belushi, I mean, yeah.
All right, that's the Rushmore of school movies. You know what to do before you leave. Subscribe, do that, and let's keep it moving. That's
and guys, if you haven't, go on over to our Patreon and take a look at what we got cooking. We've got some extra shows. We do reverse Rushmores, which is basically where we do our least favorite movie or item or whatever we're talking about that week. So check out the Patreon. We got a lot of fun stuff on there.
All right, y'all. That's it. Let's hear your school movies in the comments. Go for it. Subscribe.